Welcome to Sitting with Sallie. Today my guests are Gord LeMaistre, who is a Rotarian and a chair of the local polio awareness committee, and Dr. Peter Harland, a retired pediatrician. We're talking about polio today. This is our second episode. In our first episode, we went into a lot of detail about polio during the 50s, and we had another guest, Susan Tooley, with us, who survived polio as a child, which she talked about. Today we're going to go on from there and talk about how polio is today, a bit more about wild polio and attenuated polio, and we'll just do a quick recap. So Peter, can you just bring us what is polio?
Polio is a very infectious disease, affects mainly children, particularly under the age of 5. It has severe consequences in that a small percentage develop long-term ongoing problems with muscle atrophy, muscle weakness, and paralysis.
And many people just have very mild symptoms, similar to COVID, I think.
Right. 70% may not even know that they've caught it. An additional 25% or so will know they've caught it because they feel flu-like symptoms, fevers, aches, pains, malaise, headache, sweating, which can last a number of weeks and maybe even a month or so.
So it goes on for quite a while then.
It can go on for quite a while.
And of course, if you're asymptomatic or if mild symptoms, you're still contagious and can pass it on.
Absolutely, you can pass the virus on to close neighbors and even to the water supply in your town.
I understand that polio, there's no treatment for polio?
There is no specific treatment. Unlike bacterial infections, there is no antibiotic, there is no antiviral medication which can alleviate polio.
When someone has polio, then you're just treating the symptoms.
You treat it symptomatically, exactly.
And I also understand that once you've had polio, you can have lifelong symptoms that remain.
That's correct. And in 30 to 40% of people who've had polio may develop symptoms 30 to 40 years later, which can be quite debilitating, such as malaise, fatigue, muscle aches, muscle atrophy, further muscle atrophy, and poorly understood, but these symptoms can be ongoing and can gradually worsen.
And I think we call that post-polio syndrome?
Post-polio syndrome, yes.
And this brings us to you, Gord, and Rotary, and the number one way to help get rid of polio is through vaccination.
That is correct. It's very important to vaccinate your children. Because of vaccinations, 20 million children who would otherwise be paralyzed are walking today, and 1.5 million children who are alive today who otherwise would be dead.
And that is part of Rotary's huge effort since 1998 to eradicate polio with other partners.
That's right.
So just briefly, I know we talked about this in episode 1, but just briefly tell me a bit about Rotary's involvement.
Polio eradication, the eradication of polio is the most long-standing and significant effort that Rotary has ever made. Along with our partners, we have immunized over 2.5 billion children in over 125 countries. And we've reduced polio by 99.9%. And we're on course to eliminate and eradicate polio from the world.
And 400 million children a year is the goal for you to vaccinate.
That's right. 400 million children a year is the goal to vaccinate, and that's what we're doing.
And that's a huge, big goal, but to bring it locally, you're the chair of the local polio awareness committee is very involved too to try to bring the awareness to other people.
Yes, World Polio Day is October 24th, and this year it'll be celebrated in Kenora on Sunday, October 22nd. The Rotary members and members of our Interact Club are taking action to bring awareness and raise funds and support to end polio, so we can ensure to immunize as many children as possible.
And I know last year the mayor of Kenora actually did a proclamation for World Polio Day in Kenora.
Yes, that's very beneficial and helpful to us, and we thank the mayor for doing that, because what it does is it brings awareness to our community and also gets people in the community to support us in our effort to eradicate polio and support our fundraisers.
And just to be aware that it is not eradicated, because everybody thinks polio, not everybody, a lot of people think polio is no longer around.
That's right, because I don't think there hasn't been a case in North America and South America since 1994, so it's something you don't see here.
What are your plans for this World Polio Day?
This World Polio Day, we're going to continue this will be our third year, to have a scavenger hunt on the harbor front and a walk. We are targeting, we'd like to have a lot of the children from the schools come out this year. The scavenger hunt is arranged for people of all abilities, and it's a lot of fun. And also at that time we have a booth set up that gives polio information, and also we sell End Polio Now cookies for $5. These cookies are made by Lana's Kitchen, and I think a lot of people in Kenora know who Lana is, and she's always selling cookies at the market every week, and they are the most delicious cookies you could ever find. So,
I won't ask how many you eat. And there'll be more information as you get closer to World Polio Day to find out.
That's right. There'll be a lot more information coming forward about the scavenger hunt and other activities that will be planned on the harbor front. Also on World Polio Day, we have our Interact Club, which is students from the Thomas Aquinas High School. They do a Purple Pinky Day fundraiser at the high school, and they have the students, they make a small donation and they get their finger painted purple, which shows support for Rotary and our initiative to eradicate polio from the world.
And Peter, I know since the 1960s, polio has significantly declined. Can you bring us up to speed of what's happening with it in this century, the 21st century?
In this country, almost everyone receives the killed vaccine, Salk vaccine, by injection at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 18 months, and 4 to 5 years. So it's obligatory to have these vaccines up to date, to go to school and even to go to daycare.
And what about adults?
Well, adults are encouraged to get boosters every 10 years, along with tetanus.
And when we were talking about this earlier, I've always made it a point to get my tetanus shot. I did not know it included polio.
I think it does now, yes.
It's DPT.
DPT.
P.
P. DPTP.
Diphtheria.
Tetanus, pertussis, and polio.
Every 10 years.
Yes.
That's an important message. In July 2022, someone developed polio in Rockland County in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. This individual, a male, I believe, developed typical polio symptoms with some paralysis, which really disturbed people because it then became apparent that they'd have to investigate where did this polio come from. And it appears as though this individual was a member of a group with low vaccination rates. Now, what happens with the oral polio is that when the oral polio is given, it's an attenuated or weakened virus. This can then, after a few generations, become apparent in the community again, circulate in the community, and can mutate to become virulent once more. So this particular patient, after some investigation, was found to have oral polio vaccine disease.
And I don't mean to have it on a cliffhanger, but we're going to take a short break right here. And if you come back after the break, we will learn what happened to this community that, where one person developed polio. Welcome back to Sitting with Sallie. Today's conversation is polio, and I interrupted Peter as he was talking about how a case developed in Rockland County in July 2022. A young man developed quite serious symptoms, you were saying, from the attenuated live virus that had gradually mutated.
to restore its virulence.
And it was because it was an under-vaccinated community.
Exactly. My understanding was that this community was an ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, which is very hesitant about vaccines. And we've seen this in other communities too, in Holland, for instance, religious organizations that are reluctant to vaccinate.
And I understand at the time they found polio in the wastewater of Rockland in Orange County in the New York State. So it had actually spread to enough to be visible in the wastewater, or however they test it.
Exactly. So what happened is that after a certain time, the oral attenuated polio virus circulates in the community and mutates and becomes more virulent. And so that is one of the hazards of the original oral Sabin vaccine.
And Gord, I think you were saying that for the last couple of years, they've got a better oral vaccine.
Yes, that's correct. They have it's a less live component.
And if you can
my
explain.
understanding is it's called the NOPV, which is the novel oral polio virus vaccine, and it has been used for the past 2 years. It's being very closely monitored by the World Health Organization. They are only giving it to countries where they're able to follow and monitor it very, very closely. But this particular virus, which was developed in the States, I believe in California, this particular virus is more resistant to mutation changes. And that's part of its genetic makeup. So the hope is that this new virus, the NOPV, will become more utilized in the future.
And it's still attenuated, but because they're hoping it won't mutate, it won't be able to
That's right.
change.
And it's still an oral virus that can be given by drops, and so it can be given very cheaply to a large number of people all over the world.
And if I understand, like you just put a drop in a sugar cube or a drop under the mouth, or
Exactly.
where the injections are more difficult sometimes.
2 drops into the mouth of babies.
There's also wild polio. Can you tell me about wild polio?
Well, fortunately, there's no wild polio in North or South America. But wild polio, which is the original type 1 polio that caused all the trouble in the 1950s, still circulates in very small areas of the world. And this is what Gord is trying to eliminate with this program. So we termed it, it's endemic. That means it grumbles along at a very small rate, but every now and then it'll resurface and cause outbreaks.
Outbreaks, and then it sort of disappears a bit, and then outbreaks.
Exactly.
And Gord, I think, well, I know you mentioned in the last episode that Pakistan and Afghanistan are 2 countries in which the wild polio is still endemic.
That is true. That is, they're the only 2 countries that report polio cases every year.
And in 2000, this year?
In 2023, Afghanistan has reported 5 cases, and Pakistan 2. So we're almost there.
Almost there. And I think when we first spoke about this a year ago, there were similar numbers, not quite the same, but you know, similar numbers in both those countries.
I think it's a little less this year, but it could be. Yeah. It's coming down.
I think it's important to recognize that polio, like smallpox, is only affects humans. It doesn't affect animals. And so if you can eradicate it in humans, then it's eradicated.
It's gone. Yes, no, that is important. And as Gord was saying, you know, the Rotary's efforts are certainly showing positive effects, but it's still taking a little while longer.
And some of the reasons for that is like in some of the countries, because of the culture, the religion, there's civil wars, and there's vaccine hesitancy, and just the size and the remoteness of the countries. Like now in Pakistan and Afghanistan, for example, it's women mainly who go house to house looking for children to vaccinate. And that is the only way the job gets done. So in very remote areas, they travel all over the country. They have a little cooler with polio vaccine in it, and they travel on wagons, and they go everywhere in order to vaccinate these children, because there is a lack of health clinics in these countries. So
and also women are the most responsible people for bringing children, babies into the clinics. So if that doesn't happen, then children get missed.
Yes.
And women are also the most receptive when they knock on the door of a house. And often the women must sit down with the people they're talking to and explain the polio vaccine to them, and so they'll understand that if the child is vaccinated, they'll be protected from polio.
It's much more time consuming than what we think of someone just going into a clinic and getting a vaccination.
Exactly.
I mean, just getting to the remote areas can be very difficult at times. And you're saying women, so these are workers, and do you know how many? Any idea of how many workers? Or
well, the funding each year, it's to support 150,000 healthcare workers, so they can go out and actually go door to door looking for children that need vaccinations. So it's a big part of our funding that is used to do that, as well as for the immunization of 400 million children as well.
so, Gord, as a message, what would you really like people to pick up from our conversation about polio?
Well, the reemergence of polio in New York is really a stark reminder that polio anywhere is a threat, and vaccination is the only way to eradicate this disease.
And especially in North America, where I think we have this idea that in places where sanitation isn't as good or healthcare isn't as good, that's where polio is going to happen. And New York really was a wake-up call. Yeah. I know some of the newspapers were saying it was absolutely shocking, but a wake-up call that while it is still happening elsewhere, it can sneak back in if we aren't taking care.
We aren't diligent.
We aren't diligent.
Yes, absolutely.
And polio is only a plane ride away. And until we eradicate polio from the world, every child is at risk. And we remain committed to getting the job done.
It's a big commitment. Thank you. I appreciate you coming in and talking about your involvement with Rotary. And thank you for all the scientific information, Peter.
It's been my pleasure.
I can't tell you how much I've learned from both of you.
And thank you very much, Sallie. It's been very enjoyable talking to you today.
Well, and I hope it's been enjoyable for people watching today, because this is such an important subject. If you don't know whether you've been vaccinated for polio, even as an adult, please check with your family doctor or the health unit. Until next time.